So whenever you do these complex weight lifts like deadlift, bench press, and squat, you're working everything. And you don't need to do those. I mean, I would have trouble with my back, and I'd go to the doctor. She'd send me to PT. They'd give me these exercises that I hated doing, that I found to be boring, and I couldn't find the motivation nor the discipline to do on a regular basis. But I'll go lift those weights, and they strengthen my core.
Today's guest is Sister Pat Farrell, a Dominican sister and 72-year-old powerlifter whose story proves that discipline outlasts motivation. At her heaviest, she weighed 213 pounds. Today, she's down 70 pounds from her peak, deadlifting more than her body weight and living stronger than ever. What struck me most is that her transformation didn't begin with inspiration. It began with showing up. We talk about how faith and fitness intertwine, how Buddhist mindfulness deepened her Catholic practice, and why forgiveness and self-compassion are as essential as strength. Her journey reminds us that it's never too late to start over, that showing up again and again can be its own form of prayer. Let's start the show. Sister Pat, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me. This is an honor.
I'm really excited to have you because couple of firsts. The first member of the clergy that I've had on, so I'm excited to have a conversation about the non-physical world, but no less respect warranting being the first powerlifting competitor winner I've ever had on the show, no less at 72. I hope you don't mind me saying that.
No problem. No, I advertise it because I'm strong and healthy.
I love it. I love it. So I want to kick it off there. First of all, did you get your lift in today?
Oh, I did. I worked out this morning. I go every other day, so you hit me on workout day.
Okay, so but you're like first thing in the morning typically, right?
Pretty much. I go, the way it works is I get there at 8:30. So
okay. Well, I mean, you're there. That's 99% of the purpose here. So, I read, and I could be wrong, but in my research, I think you deadlifted 160, which is more than your weight.
Right.
Considering I think at your peak, you were 53 pounds above that, something like that.
Yeah, right now I weigh anywhere between 145 and 147 because it always fluctuates.
Sure.
And at the top of where I measured my weight, because it's like you think I probably went over this at one point, but at the top that I measured was 213 pounds.
And so you still are a vegan,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Which I actually found interesting in some of the research that this may or may not be right, but you have not always been a sister. You right. were in the private sector, in fact, in Santa Monica, if I recall, in finance. And I want to talk a little bit about that maybe later in the conversation. But I did find it interesting that, but when you found yourself going through the process of becoming a sister, they were not necessarily amenable to acquiescing to the vegan preference, and so you adapted the non-vegan diet for a while, but then you went back when they became a little bit more open to the
right. Well, and you kind of also have to look at the time.
Sure.
The time of when it was, because that would have been. I entered the convent in 1993. Okay. And so I was discerning, starting in 1991, and vegan really wasn't a thing.
Right.
Vegetarian was, but even then, I mean, people back, it seems so much has happened in the last 5-10 years.
Absolutely.
But it wasn't a thing to have food preferences.
Yeah. And vegans are not necessarily commonplace now, but they're far less uncommon than they once were. Right. So you were a standout, I'm sure. The reason I bring this up, because I read a quote that you mentioned, what got you there was cheese, cheese, cheese.
To 213 pounds? Yeah, that was cheese. Yep. I could go face down in the cheese.
So this is where I want to kick this off. What was the motivation? At what point? What was the turning point where you said, I want to turn back the clock a little bit and start to dial in? Where did that come from? I mean, it's easy to say I wanted to be healthier, I wanted to live longer. Those are all very clear
Yeah.
uh, ideas, but typically, not to go to the Simon Sinek route of the why, but like we all need to have we need to have a strong enough why to justify the consistent workout schedule. And then I want to get into this, but your own nutrition plan, especially as a vegan, in order to eat the protein that you need to consume the appropriate number of calories. You don't get from 213 to 145 and be able to deadlift 160 without conscientious measurement and managing how you're going about that. And because I want to talk a little bit about the discipline within the convent and the uniqueness within the Dominican Sisters, because I think that's a specific area of religion that I think is stand out that I think is worth mentioning. But I use that as a teaser for maybe later in the conversation. Back to the question, what was that motivator? What triggered it?
Yeah, that's a great question. But if I try to put myself back into that time, I I think I was just feeling lousy, and I was not good on my feet, and I could fall easily, and you'd notice. I mean, I knew I was getting bigger and bigger and needing larger and larger clothes. So I can't exactly. I went to Weight Watchers at the time. That was the first thing that I did, was go to Weight Watchers. And, you know, we can talk about motivation as much as we want. And certainly we do need some spark, some motivator, but what we really need is discipline. And so somehow I was able to muster up the discipline going to Weight Watchers every week and following those points. And I started to lose weight. And then I felt successful. And then I noticed that the way that the points worked was that vegetables, not much points. Cheese, lots of points. So it was, and things that had fiber, things that I knew that were healthy for me because I had eaten healthy before. Things that we know what to do. And so I figured, oh well, why don't I just try being vegan again? And then I hardly had to. I stayed with Weight Watchers for quite a while, but then I lost the weight, and then comes the real struggle, Marcus, because you reach a goal and you've reached the goal. And then, I kept it off for probably a year, and then it started to creep up.
How many years ago was this that you went down this
That
path?
would have been in 2001.
Okay, so at that point you were in your late 30s.
No, late 50s. 50s. I
Late
was in my
50s. Sorry.
50s.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
because
Yeah.
So but it was, and so then I had some yo-yo that we're familiar with over some years. I never went back up as high as I had been. It'd be like I'd get to 170 or 180 and I'd go, oops, you know, and and that happened a few times over the years, and I have been steady at this weight for probably 3+ years now. So I mean, I'm good now, but for a while I fought the battle, and one of the things, again, going back to discipline, one of the things that I learned was I used to keep a chart of my weight. When I stopped getting on the scale, as much as people say, oh, I don't want to get on the scale. If I don't get on the scale and if I don't write down that number, it starts to creep.
I cannot agree more. I mean, it's very similar. In that, in my experience, I've taken on, I've always been an athlete. But I had a son 3 years ago, and there's a number of things. I was working from home a lot longer. Needless to say, I continued to lift weights. I was relatively active, but not like in the way I used to be. And I realized that there were some aches and pains here and there, and I
Sure.
never accepted. I'm 44, but I've never accepted. You'll never hear me say I'm old or I
Mm-hmm.
feel old. Now, there are areas, right, where I feel like it takes me longer to recover. I do take more time to warm up, these types of things. But in general, I feel as strong as I've ever been. But there was a turning point where I said, I never had to worry about it. So I never really got on the scale, but I've gotten on the scale more times in the last 3 or 4 years than I have in the prior 40 years combined. And there is a monumental difference when you start to manage it. And it's not just the discipline, it's the recognition
Right.
and the connection. So when you mentioned Weight Watchers, there was a period of a couple of months at the beginning of this year, as a matter of fact, where I was weighing every single thing I was eating.
Hmm.
So I could ascribe what is the protein content. I would also take a photo. I'd do research, and so I was keeping all of those macros. And not surprisingly, there was the greatest, most immediate result during the time
Sure.
frame I was doing that. But to your point about Weight Watchers, what I think is it really allows for is the on ramp for success. So somebody once told me that motivation comes after the event, not before. People wait for the motivation to go do it, but the motivation comes not at the beginning of my run. It's at the end of the run when I come home and I feel terrific, but I do not feel motivated the second I start running. It's at the end of
Sure.
it that I want to come back and get that taste. So I only mention all these things because at what point did that success, which you had been able to garner in sequence, translate to, okay, I want to start getting into strength training? Because,
Okay.
and I'm asking this on behalf of, there are a few members of the audience, including some family members, who are older than you and younger than you, who feel incredibly lost at the prospect of going into a gym
Oh,
and
okay.
starting to do resistance training.
Sure.
And I just love the idea that you found this late in life and have maintained the consistency and enjoyment by way of doing it. Um, what was the turning point, and how has that manifested into making it so sustainable?
Well, there was a time, it would have been probably around 2010 or 11, when I live in San Francisco now. But I lived in San Rafael, where most of our sisters live, and it's on the same campus where the university that we founded. We don't run it anymore. It's there, we're separate from them, but we're still connected in ways. Dominican University of California. So they're around us, and there's a gym across the street that is the Dominican University's gym. And so I thought I'd go over there, and I felt a little lost in there. Didn't know what to do. Didn't really like the treadmills and stuff like that. And so there was a little note on the board, a little card or something or other, of this guy who offered coaching. And so I contacted him. He was an older fellow, and I had a few meetings with him, and he helped orient me to the gym. He oriented me to the machines, to the cable machines, and to some dumbbells too, so that I was able to do dumbbell rows and bicep curls and overhead presses with dumbbells. And it was a real simple way of doing 15 reps, then 12 reps, then 10 reps. And then eventually I might add, 2 pounds, whatever, because those dumbbells are smaller, and they go up in smaller increments. And I found that I enjoyed doing it, but I didn't really grow in it in a way. And then I kind of fell off. I think I know I ended up moving and then losing that gym. And it's easy to fall off. It is so easy to fall off of stuff, and it's hard to get back on. But the next time I probably went to the gym after that would have been sometime after 2014. So around 2015, 16. I was living in the Chicago area. I had taken a position as the executive director of an organization called the Dominican Sisters Conference, which unites different congregations of Dominican sisters across the country. So I moved to Chicago to be more centrally located, because it's just easier to get places there. And there was a gym that I thought, and I'd started putting on weight again, and And also I didn't feel as mobile and as strong as I wanted to be. So I got a membership at a gym there and started to do the same thing that I'd learned before. So at this point, I wasn't a stranger to the gym, but I probably was the only woman in the weight room. But occasionally there might be somebody. In those days, there weren't as many women, and I knew I enjoyed it, but I just didn't take it very far. And then along came COVID, and so and then I ended up coming home back to California in 2020 in May during COVID, and so it took me a while then again to get back to it because there's these blocks of time when I get distracted and I'm doing other things, and maybe it's a new position and other things are overwhelming, even though when you do exercise the overwhelm gets managed better, but when that's going on, it's hard to manage yourself. So it would have been in 2024 in April. I thought I really need to get back to this, so I at that point I found an online coach, and I used that for about 3 months, and it was like working out with stuff that I had in my where I live. So I have some dumbbells, I have a bench, and I had gotten one of those adjustable things where you put all of the things together and make your own funny looking barbell. Um, but the chemistry just wasn't right. Maybe the timing wasn't right. I have no idea. But in March of this year, I was kind of like, enough already. I need to do something. And so I went into the congregation. We have a wellness coordinator who works with our senior sisters, and I would be one of the senior sisters, although I'm one of the younger senior sisters. And I went to her and said that I really wanted to work out again, but I thought I should have a trainer. And she said, "Great, we'll support that." So I found another online trainer, and she's vegan, and she lives in Russia, but she used to be here in the States. And so I connected with her, and I had in the back of my mind that I thought I'd like to compete at something at this. And she had part of the reason that she attracted me was she had done competitions and could help someone with that. And so again, I started in my apartment, and before long, I'm outgrowing these weights in my apartment, and I went to one of the big box gyms where good luck finding a bench, good luck finding a barbell, good luck finding anything, and really good luck finding anybody to help spot for you. So I went back to our wellness person, and she agreed that I could find another gym, which see, the other one, the box gym, Medicare paid for, but this one we had to pay for. So anyway, and the gym that I ended up going to had a group that was going to go to a competition. So it was like, so I had company to go with me the first time. I mean, I've signed up for another competition and nobody from the gym is going, but I don't care. Now I've been before. I'm not a stranger. And besides, by the time I walked in there, there'd been television programs. I walked in and they said, "Oh, you're Sister Pat." So it was, anyway, there's a lot of people make friends. It's a really strong, the body, not the bodybuilding, maybe, the powerlifting community is very supportive. So, and I've enjoyed it. There is something very empowering. I would say this for women. There's something very empowering about picking up a barbell with these big weights on the end of it that make you feel like Wonder Woman.
Oh yeah. There's so much here that I want to unpack. First, where do you think the competition thing came from? Has that always, you wanted to compete in something? Was it just that weights happened to be it at that moment? Or has it always been related to weights? Or did you want to compete in something else? You wanted to find some area to compete in?
I don't know where that came from.
That's so interesting.
Honestly, it was like, this could be fun. And you know what? I think part of it is I'd never compete in running. I don't like it. And number two, I'm not good at it. And I think even if I worked at it, I wouldn't be a competitor in it. I don't think I'm built for it. But there was something about I think I had been encouraged by some women that I had seen online who were working out with weights in their 70s. They didn't compete, but watching them, I thought, there's, and one of them had said, when you get this old, you're lifting more weights than other people, than anybody else. Well, I mean, I know that there's women my age and older who've lifted way more than I can lift at this point. So I'm not quite in their league yet, but still at the same time, it's not like you're not competing against 20 people.
Right.
Not that that's it's not a good or bad, but it is kind of fun to be the only one on the stage at 72 years old lifting weights.
No, no question. What also strikes me is, I don't know. Maybe I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I would imagine there's a lot of courage in having to do what you're doing just by virtue of the intimidation factor, going into a gym where there are very few, if any, women, let alone women above a certain age, and to continue to do it and actually find um, a support network that's valuable, that allows you to actually embrace it. I just started taking jujitsu at 44, and like I said, I've been an athletic person, but I've never done martial arts. And walking into that place, I was reminded of how my like 3-year-old son must have been switching schools, going to a preschool,
Oh,
and it's like, oh wow, like there's this is a muscle I had, for the worst of me, let fall dormant. And anyway, it was just really, it was sort of special to re-embrace that fear in a way that was, or I get reacquaint myself with that comfort within the fear of the repetitiveness of the fear. And I'm just curious if you had that, like going back into an environment, like going to a competition, to me seems like an intimidating prospect. Was it not for you?
I know I felt anxious. Yeah, I did have. I was kind of like nervous, anxious about doing that. But you know what? There was a ton of women in the group. I may have been the oldest, but there were others that were masters. Maybe a woman in her 60s, a few women in their 50s. Um, so courageous. It's an interesting word. I mean, I don't think of myself as a courageous person, but then somebody will tell me that I am. But fearful. Because I think of courage and fear, and I really wasn't fearful. Anxious would have been the word. And I do know that I've just received so much encouragement that I can do this, both from my coach and from the guys at the gym. The guys at the gym. It's a small, kind of like a boutique place almost. It's called the Yard, and you make a reservation for your pod, and everything is in the pod that you need. There's the bench, there's the rack, there's the barbell, there's all of the weights for it. And you have your period of time. I make a reservation for 2 hours. I don't use all two. I usually it's about an hour and a half. But everything is there, and they will help. Now, I remember feeling like when I would watch the guys do their lifting, and here they are deadlifting 400 pounds, and I'm saying, here I am with my and they would like immediately, don't do that, you are doing great, you're crushing it,
Yeah.
you
Yeah, I
know
mean, I guess I have firsthand knowledge of people who are far younger than you that say, "I'm just too old to be doing this stuff." And to me, it's
oh,
I
you're
mean, how
you're
much of that comes from your
you
mind?
if you're in your 40s and you want to pick up your grandchildren when you are in your 70s, you should be deadlifting.
Oh yeah.
If you are in your 40s and you want to be able to get off of the toilet when you're in your 80s, you should be squatting.
Well, if you look at like a lot of the blue zones, I guess I'm thinking more in Japan where there's more centenarians than in most other places. One of the more common traits is that they do squat religiously, consistently,
We
both from a
lost it.
flexibility and a strength
We lost our
perspective.
squat.
Yeah.
Our chair. I'm sitting on a chair. You're sitting on
Yeah,
a.
yeah.
We're sitting on chairs. We lost squatting when we were maybe five.
Sure. Sure. What have you noticed about Well, I won't even limit it. What have you noticed change as a result of this consistency? I didn't realize you had just started competing 6 months ago.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
July
incredible.
July was the competition.
Well, I guess you started training for the
Yeah, yeah,
competition
yeah.
in
Right,
April, right?
right.
So, yeah, so that to me is incredible for you to have accelerated, to have been. I mean, look, maybe the courage wasn't facing the fear, but I think there's courage staring down the clock at 8 o'clock, knowing that you got to go into the gym and knowing this is your first of 3 days this
Right.
week that you're going to have to go in, and then repeating that week after week after
Yeah.
week. That's really, people talk about what you want most as a way to determine value, but it's what you're willing to give up that really determines where your values lie. And if you're willing to give up that hour and a half, 2 hours, by the way, most people at 30 would be happy to get 45 minutes in the gym, but for you to to be suggesting you're spending an hour and a half in there is, um, to me, is spectacular. I mean, I'm thinking if you were in the gym, just how I probably wouldn't be able to take my eyes off of you because of how inspiring it is to me to see. I mean, I see a lot of people. I've seen people with physical disabilities in there, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just really a remarkable thing to see. Like there's a respect to the process that I have for people that share that discipline, that religiousness. Forgive me for using that word if it
It's
comes out
fine.
of context, but I do think there's an element of that repetitive, persistent returning to a focal point is, um, I think it's a learned skill. Some might be easier than others to take it on, but I really take issue with people saying, um, I can't do that, or that's not me. That's just a really tough thing for me to hear. I'm sort of droning on, but I want to go back to my original question. What have you seen um, in your life change from being more consistent about this,
Yeah.
and your weight loss and
Yeah.
your general stability and confidence?
Well, first of all, I mean, I do realize that there are folks that have situations where they can't squeeze one more thing into their lives. And I see them, and they have children, working two jobs, maybe even a single parent. I mean, they are just hanging on by their fingernails. And so I feel especially blessed that I'm able at this point in my life with the type of work that I do that I'm able to have flexibility, that I'm able to determine to do this at this time. So I'm blessed with that. So, and I'm grateful. And I also get in 10 to 12,000 steps a day. So that's my movement. But what have I noticed is, well, from the time of my 30s, I've had lower back issues. And ever since I put on weight, then whenever I had heavier weight, I noticed that I had knee issues, and they told me that it was arthritis, but they took some X-rays at some point, and I was going to the chiropractor regularly, and it kind of kept the back problems at bay, so that it wasn't acute and bothering me. So I haven't needed to go to the chiropractor since I've been doing this.
How does
I
your back
have
feel?
no lower back. I mean, you know what? I'm going to tell you that deadlifting has got to be the best thing for a back.
There's one person in particular I know will listen to this, and I hope he's listening to it because that's what I keep
Yeah.
going back, because a lot of people think deadlifting
Going to
helps.
hurt your back.
Well, absolutely, and that it's only helping your legs, but it's
Oh,
surprising how little people are understanding how important it is to your core, your stability, your psoas, your glutes, your everything that's like among the most critical and used muscles within your body.
the whole posterior chain.
Absolutely. Yes.
From the back of the Achilles tendons, I believe, all the way up through my neck, it all gets worked. I'm working on squat because when I competed, I only competed in deadlift and bench press because I lost my squat, and so I have been working on trying to lower the depth of my squat. And at this point, I'm horizontal. So I've gotten down to barely being able to squat a little bit to being horizontal, and I need to drop my butt further down because you have to be at an angle to qualify with the squat, but that works everything as well. And then of course the bench press may it's mostly doing upper body, but you can't, it's not isolated like a machine is. So whenever you do these complex weight lifts like deadlift, bench press, and squat, you're working everything. And you don't need to do those. I mean, I would have trouble with my back, and I'd go to the doctor. She'd send me to PT. They'd give me these exercises that I hated doing, that I found to be boring, and I couldn't find the motivation nor the discipline to do on a regular basis. But I'll go lift those weights, and
Yeah.
they strengthen my core.
Yeah. What's your routine? Like, can you tell me, like, what are you doing something specific on Mondays versus Wednesdays versus Fridays? Are you listening to certain music? Tell me about what it's like being in that gym.
Okay. Okay. So I put in my earbuds, and I have sometimes, I have started, sometimes I might be listening when I walk. I get to walk there. It's 4 blocks away. So I might listen to a podcast or a book on the way there. But I have some playlists that have driving music that I'll listen to, that maybe have music from Pirates of the Caribbean and stuff like that, that kind of get me emotionally pumped up, that I'll listen to. And then I off and on with it, because then I'm talking to the guys at the gym. Could and in terms of the routine, my coach, she didn't start this way. She used a different kind of app at the beginning, but since I got serious about powerlifting, she does what she says powerlifters do. They use spreadsheets. So if we use Google Sheets, and she'll fill in this week with day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and on and on and on. And sometimes she puts the weights she wants me to do. Sometimes she puts RPE, which is the oh god, I can't think of it now, but it's basically how many reps do you have in the tank? How many reps can you do before you run out of gas? And so if it's RPE 8, that means I probably could do 2 more. And
Rate of perceived exertion.
thank you. There you go.
Yeah.
So and maybe so but lots of times she gives me the rate. So weights. So today was I did deadlift today, and I'm not the my best at this point is 165 pounds. So, but you don't lift that regularly. What you do is it gets broken up into pieces, and you do volume. I didn't understand that at first, but I'm getting it. And so I did 3 sets of 100 and was it 120 or 130 pounds today. So,
Three
and
sets
then
of 10, 8.
no, there 3 sets. They were probably 4. Yeah,
Okay.
so when you're powerlifting
Right.
is lower reps. If you were doing bodybuilding, as I understand it, you wouldn't be lifting as heavy, but you'd be doing more reps. And they don't necessarily do the complex ones. And so then after that, I did she's also got me working on things so that I can do a pull up at some point. So I did something that's called an Australian chin up today, which is setting the bar lower so that my feet are actually on the ground, and I'm sitting and pulling myself up. So would have done 12 of those. And then after that, I think it was after that, I did barbell rows today. I had done dumbbell rows earlier this week, so today it was barbell rows, and so that was 55 pounds. And then I did. Then she had me doing curls, so barbell curls and dumbbell curls, and so that was today's variety. Other days it could be. I might be doing flies. I might be. Those are the accessories, but there's usually on deadlift days, that's the main lift. On other days, I'm doing usually a combination of bench and squat with some accessories.
I love this conversation. I love having this conversation. I just never thought I'd be having it with a 72-year-old nun. Which is this is so special. So I'm really appreciating like the detail that you're providing. How have your sisters responded to this?
Well, they've been very supportive. I mean, I think in the beginning they were a little like, huh?
Right. Right.
And even when the first thing came, when the local TV show wanted to do an interview, there was a little bit of, is this okay? And then we have a PR person who said, "Oh, this is all good news. This is all happy news. This is all feel good stuff. This is not a gotcha moment." And then what was amazing was how the whole thing took off, and the sisters are delighted. It brings a little. There've been a couple of them that point to more my life as a sister, not just as somebody lifting weight who's old. That's just, not just a novelty, but how did this all? What's your life like? And so I think they're, and my congregation is not. This is not the first time we've had an athlete. So was it a week ago? A week ago Sunday, we buried a dear sister of ours. Her name was Marion Irvine. She was 95 years old, and she is a famous marathoner. And she started running because she was overweight and she smoked, and her niece came to her and said, Marion, you got to stop this. You got to get healthy. And so she got her to start running. And now Marion discovered that she was good at it. So she ended up being she went to the qualifying for the Olympics when she was 54.
Wow. I'm
And
glad
now,
that you brought her up. I wanted to ask about her. I
yeah,
mean, did you guys it's a nice thing to have someone who shares a very unique experience. Something that, I mean, the altitude is very thin for, I would imagine, sisters, certainly sisters above 70 who are partaking in competitive physical regimens. You had to value at the very least the sense that there was somebody else facing similar challenges.
Yeah, well, I think so. I mean, that she did this. She did this when she was not in her 20s and 30s. And even though she didn't compete when she was my age, because I think running is another, well, she probably could have, but I think she had injuries that kept her from, competition. But she never stopped moving. 3 months before she died. Now, she's been using a walker for years. I don't think she hasn't had any Achilles tendons anymore. She's used a walker for years, and 3 months before she died, she was still walking 3 miles a day with her walker. She couldn't see. She'd be walking up the street not seeing where she was going, and she had her floppy hat, and people knew her, so I think nobody hit her. uh but she was amazing. She was dogged, she was determined, and she was that way about everything in her life, about her work, her ministry, about social justice, about whatever it is. I was able to deliver some remarks about her at her funeral, and what I ended up quoting a passage from the book of Ecclesiastes: "Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all of your might." And that was how she lived her life. And so she encouraged other people. She was always encouraging other sisters to walk or run or do something. And so she had encouraged me along the way, and she came to the competition. She and about 5 other sisters came to the competition, and everybody left early, and she stayed until I got my medal.
I love that. That's special.
Yeah. And then 2 weeks before she died, she said, "When's your next competition?"
Yeah.
And then
Pushing
she
you.
said, "Are you working on your squat?"
Oh, that's so good. So we can start. I don't want to drone on too much because I am not sure if everybody values the discussions about the weightlifting as much as you and I might. But have you found the fact that the competitions create a new light post that you find yourself, maybe it becomes a little bit easier, the grooves are greased a little bit more to be consistent about that workout, knowing you have this destination that you are working toward?
Yeah, I think it feels a little more possible now
Mhm.
than it did the first time. I think if you there was what took courage perhaps was registering in the first place.
Sure,
Okay,
sure.
then it's like then you work towards it. Okay. But I think because at the beginning it was like, I could really do this? Can I compete in these two things? And
Sure.
I could. And so now my big stretch is I want to be able to squat to depth
Yeah.
come January. So can I do this? Well, we'll see. I'm working at it the best I can.
Well, what I love about this is that there's a revelatory aspect to it. Is sort of the more you get into it, you find something, some new nuance to push yourself a little bit further, to expand your skill set. And I think this is something, I don't know. I think it's really easy for all of us to fall off of. I see the value in a 3-year-old learning this, but I'm realizing how valuable it is even at my age to identify this and how it fell off. But how has your life changed as a result of the media attention? You've been on sort of a whirlwind tour. You've been on network TV and local television.
Tamron
What?
Hall show is the latest. It was wild. Yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So how has that impacted you in your congregation?
Well, I mean, the sisters have enjoyed it. I went to a watch party at the convent with all the sisters, and they loved it. They enjoyed it, and I think it's a boost for morale in a lot of ways, because it is about life. And it's not, I mean, I don't expect the sisters at 80 some years old to go over to the gym and start lifting heavy weights, but some of them were saying they're trying to walk more. This is
Right.
good. you know um and I mean, it's another one of those things where you just learn to we have more in us available to us than we have any idea. And it isn't about weightlifting. It's just
Yeah.
about everything. I mean,
Well,
I
I
can
think
think back. I can think back to long before I became a sister, and I had some plumber came and needed to do some. We needed to put some tiling somewhere, and I watched him do it, and I thought, I can do that.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, so it's kind of like we can do stuff.
sure. Well, honestly, that's why I wanted to have you on. I mean, the weightlifting to me is a proxy for really what's underneath, which is the exploration on what you're truly capable of, what's lies underneath. And I don't think we do push ourselves enough. But one thing I wanted to highlight is I was raised Catholic. I'm not Catholic now. I'm not practicing. But I didn't know much about the Dominican Sister of San Rafael. So I looked them up, and I want to just open this up for you. But the one thing that caught me, and I found a lot of, I might be reading too much into it, but there's through lines in sort of both how you express yourself, but certainly within the attention and desire within weightlifting itself. But the 4 pillars I identified
Mm,
are prayer, study, community, and ministry.
hmm.
The thing that took me, that stood out, was the study component.
Yeah.
All of these are disciplinary in a number of respects, including prayer. But the study to me stood out in, I don't know, is it St. Thomas Aquinas sort of a pursuit of knowledge, of an openness to how everything sort of can contextualize itself within God's work. And I don't want to be putting words in your mouth, but I'm asking you if you can share a little bit more about the Dominican sisterhood, because I do think it seems dissimilar to maybe other conventional ways to get into uh, becoming a nun. Am I incorrect in that assumption?
Well, I think we look at the Dominican sisters. I don't know if people know this, but sisters put letters after their names, which represent the congregation that they belong to. So I, as a Dominican sister, put the letters OP after my name, which stands for Order of Preachers. So all Dominicans, whether they are the friars, the priests, the brothers, the sisters, the nuns, all of us use that OP after our names. And I think we look at that as a charism, a gift. And that charism is built around, in a manner of speaking. I'm glad you mentioned the pillars, because I think they're kind of a structure that holds something. And they hold that charism in a way. So there's community, or common life. Community is what glues our lives together and connects us, and it's our relationship. And relationships, it's relationships with one another, but it's relationships that go beyond just even us, because we're interrelated with everything and everyone, and with God through us, in us, and around. So I think the community is bigger. I mean, there is, so I am supported by my community when I go to an event like this, or if I were to go to, any kind of event, um, we had a, when we were, during the time when Iraq was being bombed.
Hmm.
So this is history now. We Dominican
Late
Sisters,
90s, early
yeah,
2000s.
the Dominican Sisters had these. Wore these buttons that said "I have family in Iraq," and it had our shield on it. But there's Dominican Sisters and Dominican priests and Dominican. We're all over. So I have family everywhere, and there's a sense in when that part of the family suffers, I do too, in a way. And when a member of the family succeeds, I do too. We share in all of the joys and the sorrow through community. And then common life, common prayer. So part of our life is that we pray together. So this evening before dinner, I'll be praying with the sisters. And tomorrow morning again, I'll go to morning prayer with the sisters. So this is part of the pulse of our, keeps the pulse of our life, this connection. But that is also part of community. Can I pray by myself? Sure, I can, but there's something that knits us together differently when we pray together. And ministry or service, we're not doing this just to be sisters. We're doing this to be of service to others, to have some sort of ministry that matters. I mean, that makes a difference in people's lives, and we support one another in that. And so during those years when I was overweight and going to Weight Watchers, actually where I live, it's across the street from the school where I used to be principal. So, I was serving those families, those kids, those teachers, um, and then study. I think study is important because, you talked first off about a why. I think study kind of like helps us with our whys, you know, helps us, and study means that even it could be studying the paper, it could be listening to a person's opinion about something that doesn't agree with me so that I can learn more about where that person is coming from. So there's all kinds of ways of study. Some of it is book learning, but some of it is studying nature, studying people. And so now with weightlifting, I mean, I'm not satisfied with just picking up the weights and doing the routine that my coach gives me, but I'm reading stuff and learning stuff and listening to stuff and trying to understand. Some of these people are really crazy out there too.
Sure.
But so I'm trying to get as much as I can because it helps me.
Yeah. How
So,
how do you think that study plays into your relationship with God per se?
well, I think I'm not sure that I can say it helps me understand God better, because God is the great mysterious something, you know. And in fact, perhaps studying helps me understand that God is not as definable as we'd like God to be. And it helps me understand myself better. And when I do that, I understand my shortcomings, my failings better, my successes, and then that makes me more open to other people and their failings too. And maybe that makes us a little more godlike when we can be more understanding of an entire situation, as least as entire as we can know it.
Uh, this is so you're actually taking this in the direction that I was interested in going because I am interested in. I recently had a guest who had fibrosarcoma, which is a cancer of skin tissue, which was in his face when he was 20 years old, and he had over 30 surgeries over 7 years. And, he's got a facial difference. But something that I really enjoyed talking to him about was what identity was, because in a lot of ways he
Mm.
had to get reacquainted with who he was, and in many respects he alludes to maybe not having known who he really was prior to the event that caused him to actually find out. And I'm where is this related to you? I'm curious how study, even the weightlift. I mean, in a lot of ways, to me, you are finding more and more about yourself. You're observing the outside world to get a better understanding of what your own capabilities are, where your own parameters of understanding are, how you can influence other people, how you can help other people. But what comes with that, and I might be misreading it, but there is an elimination of ego in all of these pillars. There's a service orientation, a facilitator on behalf of God, serving the community around you. I guess, how do you reconcile sort of your own personhood, your own self, with that greater surrounding, how you serve other people, how you listen to them better? Um, I'm throwing a lot at you, but I'm just curious what your perspective is, because you, your commitment for as long as you've been committed, um, I think affords you a different intrinsic understanding of the philosophies around faith and what that means to people. And that, I'm sort of scratching at that, is sort of, where does that faith come from, and how does that relate to your own set of beliefs and battles and judiciousness relative to study, right? Like finding proofs and stuff like that.
Well, proofs, I don't know that they exist.
Fair enough.
We human beings like solid things that we can hang on to, and none of it's solid. I'm not. You're not. Um, I am not who I was when I was 213 pounds. I'm not who I was actually when I started powerlifting. I'm not who I was when I became a sister, when I was playing in the backyard, I'm not that person. We are all, it's kind of like that. You can't step into the same stream twice.
Right.
We are, there's this continual change that happens to us. I think one of the things that has helped me, and it hasn't taken me away from my Catholicism or my Christianity, but is exposure to Buddhism.
Mm.
You
Talk more
know,
about
so
that.
well, first off is meditating and learning as you meditate that these thoughts arise. Where the heck do they come from? I'm not manufacturing them. They're not coming from me. So a lot of those kinds of things of why do I do this or why do I think these things becomes moot. Doesn't matter. They just are. And it's kind of like you can use the throwaway expression of it is what it is, and that does sound like a throwaway expression. But on the other hand, all we have is what is, and we are busy making stories about what we thought it was and who we think we are, and we're not any of those things. All we have is, and it isn't like you're just not doing nothing and living in the present moment and la 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 la, but because we have to be attentive to the things that we need to do. We need to be kind to one another. We need to be um, we need to stay competent to the job at hand. And but there's so much that we have no control over. Absolutely no control over. So how do we negotiate this life where stuff comes at us that we're trying to control? We can't even control ourselves. We can't control our reactions. And so I think what I've learned is to be a lot more welcoming to the me that arrives.
That's such a beautiful response to me, and it tickles me a little bit because I just recently had um Bob Roth, who is the CEO of the David Lynch Foundation. I've been a transcendental meditator for many
Oh, okay.
years, and we talked about this. And so I'm going to restate something for the audience who may have heard it already. So it is a little bit repetitive. But what's interesting is that same process of you are not your thoughts. In order to accept that, one practice might be to observe that you're observing your thought,
Yeah.
but by virtue of acknowledging that you're observing the thought, there's also an observer observing the observer, and it starts to go into this echo chamber all the way down, and until you start to realize, that is me, but I am nothing.
Yeah.
What's down there is sort of this nothingness and everythingness, in the sense that it's consciousness that sort of flows. I use this analogy from in fauna and trees. They, one side of the forest will start to protect itself against a threat that's happening on the other, because it's being communicated through the soil. There's some consciousness going on there, and for the first time I found a connection to God in a way that I hadn't found before. And in that role, I found a portal into connecting with a lot of family members who are very religious that I had otherwise felt distant from. I found
Hmm.
a way to understand maybe something that they implicitly sort of understood, or I just understood them in a new way, including their prayer. To be honest, the prayer, that discipline of the act of sort of going back. So I really value that you're reconciling the Buddhist sort of idea with a Catholic pursuit, and I think that's incredibly valuable. I'm curious, as you find that openness to people, what do you think you take away from how you've counseled those in your community? In sort of, you alluded to, there are certain members of your community who cannot go to the gym because they are single parents or working multiple jobs, whatever the case may be. How do you counsel them in terms of finding peace and the ability to mitigate some of those
Mm.
um, stresses that you allude to, that powerlifting can help you with, in terms of
Right.
maybe metabolizing those anxieties?
Well, I think the main thing that we need to do is forgive ourselves for not
Mm.
being perfect. You know, I that's a good question, but I mean, I think, it's a practice. It's all a practice. So if you're going to practice gratitude, you practice saying thank you. There's a poem somewhere, say thank you until you mean it. You know, and I think the same thing is true with forgiving. And maybe we start with forgiving others first, so that maybe we can start to forgive ourselves, because the person that we most need to forgive is ourselves. Because once we can do that, we really can forgive almost everybody. Not maybe not immediately, but because what we do when we forgive other people, we set ourselves free. And so then, if we can realize that, because there's the quote about being vengeful. We're vengeful towards somebody. It's like drinking poison and hoping they'll die. And so if we can actually, you can hear that and say ha ha ha, but if we can actually really grok that, get that, it can shift something inside of us, and we can learn to start doing that with ourselves as well. If I see somebody who is beating themselves up for not doing enough, maybe they don't have time to go to church, or maybe they don't have time to play with their kid, or I don't know what you're doing. Number one, stop shooting on yourself. And you know what, do the little things that you can, and be great, and try to find some space in your life to be grateful for those things that you can do.
Yeah. How do you advise people who might be struggling with their faith? As someone who, it seems
Okay.
like you had faith, and maybe, I don't want to say lost it, but you were in the private sector, and at some point it turned to the point where you wanted to get back in
Right.
in it. And maybe I'm wrong, but is that a fair assessment? And what do
Yeah,
you?
that's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
How,
I think to realize that God, if this is an interesting thing. Something came up about this the other day, wrestling with God. Sometimes you might feel like you're wrestling with your faith, I don't believe this. I can't, this is dumb. How can anybody believe that? I don't think that God is that worried about the things we believe. Number one. And number two, it's okay to wrestle with God and God's ideas because God is big enough to wrestle. And number two, there's a history of wrestlers. Now, if you follow in the Hebrew scriptures, so if you are of any of the Abrahamic faiths, you would have come across the story of Jacob wrestling with an angel who might have been God, and his hip comes out of joint, and then he names the place Bethel because God was in this place. And so the places where we wrestle, the places where we struggle, those are the places where God is.
wow, wow. Well, do you think? I might be misreading, and maybe it's the what I do read, but it seems like faith is having a resurgence in a way that I don't recall it being as prevalent. And I think maybe coming post pandemic,
Mm,
I don't know if it's mental health or also within Catholicism, seeing the first millennial canonization.
yeah.
I'm curious. Do you see an influx, or you think I'm misreading that zeitgeist?
There could be. There could be. I've wondered myself. I mean, I don't know what kind of direction it's taking. It's hard to know whether I think there's a lot of frustration, anger, uncertainty, worry, fear currently in our culture. There's a lot of animosity. There's all kinds. So I think that people are looking for an anchor. And so it's hard to know what direction that would take over time. But I think that people naturally reach out for something beyond. I believe it's all within us. And at the same time, we don't know that we're reaching out someplace else to find it someplace else. And hopefully, when we reach out in a faith journey, no matter which tradition it is, it ends up bringing us back to find out that it's been here all along.
Yeah. What a great way to end this. You're an inspiration, and I love talking to you. I think I got a lot of value out of this conversation, and I just want to commend you that it's great that you're getting into the gym. It's great that you're doing this community service, but you putting yourself out there in this way and expanding the platform, I think, is allowing people who wouldn't be otherwise introduced to these ideas. Um, you're doing an incredible service. So I just want to
Thank
thank
you.
you for doing that. And this has been a real joy and inspiration. So do you have any closing thoughts or things you think we might have missed?
Well, I can't think of what we missed, Marcus, but I do. I appreciate the time. And if there's anything, I mean, I think we need to try things we haven't tried, believe things we haven't believed, even trust people we haven't trusted. Trust life. We're all going to die anyway. So do it. There is. No, I'll pass on that quote. But you know what? It's a wonderful life. Um, there's a book that I read several years ago. It was written by Edith. Can't think of her last name, but I know the book was called The Choice. She was she lived through the Holocaust, and she teaches in her book and whenever she talks that we always have the opportunity to choose. We think that this is misery that somebody put upon us and it's just awful, but we can choose to go through it with dignity. So no matter what faces us, you talked about your friend with the facial, cancer, and sounds like he really got into it he took it by the horns, you know, he went in there and faced it, and he's facing recreating himself. And that's what we have to do with everything in life, is to, whatever your hand finds to do it with all of your might. So, so my hands right now are doing, barbells, but you know.
Sage advice. Thank you, Sister Pat.
Okay, Marcus, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. For a detailed list of episodes and show notes, visit scalesofsuccesspodcast.com. If you found this conversation engaging, consider signing up for our newsletter, where we go even deeper on a weekly basis, sharing exclusive insights and actionable strategies that can help you in your own journey. We'd also appreciate if you subscribed, rated, or shared today's episode. It helps us to attract more illuminating guests, adding to the list of enlightening conversations we've had with New York Times bestsellers, producers, founders, CEOs, congressmen, and other independent thinkers who are challenging the status quo. You can also follow us for updates, extra content, and more insights from our guests. We hope to have you back again next week for another episode of Scales of Success. Scales of Success is an Edge West Capital production.